Silver Lake, a small town in Texas, seemed like an idyllic corner of America at first glance. Quiet streets, quaint cafes, friendly neighbors, all of it created a sense of harmony. However, the heart of the town was the Silver Lake Stars School, a place that had become an oasis for young talents. Specializing in sports and cheerleading, it attracted ambitious dreamers from across the country. Talented athletes and their energetic cheerleaders were always the pride of the local community. Among these young stars, 16-year-old Kelly Reed shone the brightest. Her energetic performances during games made her the darling of the entire school. Tall, with long blonde hair and an unwavering smile, she embodied the ideal American cheerleader. Everyone admired her confidence and optimism, and teachers often held her up as a role model. Kelly was the epitome of success and happiness. Her name was always mentioned with pride, a perfect facade that hid many unseen cracks beneath. One such crack was her connection with 17-year-old Eric Lynch, the most popular boy in school and the star of the football team. Eric had good looks, charisma, and natural confidence that drew people to him. He was dating Alice Walker, the 17-year-old leader of the cheerleading team, who was known for being ambitious and uncompromising. Alice was someone who tolerated no deviations from her plans and always achieved her goals. Her relationship with Eric appeared perfect, but this idol had already begun to crack. At school, rumors started swirling that Eric was spending too much time with Kelly. Students noticed how they often talked after practice, laughed at inside jokes, and seemed to share a special closeness. Although Kelly tried to avoid attention, her frequent interactions with Eric became the main topic of discussion. When Alice heard the rumors, she began to feel her position beside Eric was under threat. If tension between Kelly and Alice over Eric began to rise, Luke Campbell observed everything from a completely different perspective. He was one of Eric's best friends, but also his complete opposite. Luke kept to the shadows, avoiding attention, even though he possessed a sharp mind and an equally strong drive for success. However, his feelings for Kelly were a dark secret he couldn't share with anyone. He had been in love with her for years, but his love was unrequited. To Kelly, he was just a friend, if she noticed him at all. Luke's jealousy toward Eric gradually grew. The more he watched Kelly laugh with his friend, the stronger his sense of injustice became. He convinced himself that Eric didn't deserve Kelly, that only he, Luke, could truly understand and make her happy. But instead of openly talking to her, he allowed his emotions to simmer inside, finding no release. Silver Lake Stars School gave the impression of being the perfect place for young talents to flourish. But beneath the glitter and competitions lay the darker side of human relationships. Rivalry, a desire for control, and fear of losing what one considered theirs. The atmosphere gradually engulfed the key players in this story, each with their own motives and weaknesses driving them to the edge. The cracks beneath the school's perfect facade would soon become too apparent, and Silver Lake would face an event that would forever change its history. By mid-October 2012, the atmosphere at Silver Lake Stars School began to shift. Despite the illusion of harmony within the prestigious institution, tensions among the key figures of the unfolding conflict steadily rose. The main players in this confrontation were Kelly Reed, Alice Walker, Eric Lynch, and Luke Campbell. Kelly Reed remained at the center of attention, but her life had changed. She knew that rumors about her friendship with Eric Lynch were spreading among the students, and many saw it as an opportunity to gossip about her personal life. Kelly tried not to show her emotions and kept her usual smile, but signs of discomfort were beginning to show. She avoided unnecessary stares and tried not to draw attention to her relationship with Eric. Her behavior seemed controlled, but underneath it lay a sense of insecurity. Alice Walker, Eric's girlfriend and the cheerleading captain, was gradually losing her composure. Always ambitious and determined to control every aspect of her life, her suspicions about Eric and Kelly began to shake her confidence. Over the past few weeks, she obsessively observed them, looking for proof of her fears. Her jealousy turned into an obsession. She scrutinized every interaction between Kelly and Eric, gradually convincing herself that there was more than just friendship between them. For Alice, this became a challenge to her position in school and her personal relationships. Her behavior grew increasingly unstable, and she often sought opportunities for open confrontation with Kelly. The tension between the two girls became noticeable to other members of the cheerleading team, further fueling the conflict. Meanwhile, Luke Campbell, one of Eric's best friends, observed the situation from a different angle. His jealousy toward Eric, hidden under the guise of friendship, began to surface. Luke had long been in love with Kelly, but she didn't notice his feelings, leaving him in a constant state of frustration. He tried to focus on his studies and training, but thoughts of Kelly consumed him. Luke began avoiding Eric and spent more time alone, reflecting on his predicament. At a school party celebrating the football team's victory, Luke witnessed a moment that he interpreted as confirmation of all his suspicions. He saw Eric and Kelly leaving the venue together, smiling at each other. To others, it might have seemed like an innocent interaction, but Luke perceived it as a betrayal. His internal tension reached a breaking point. The next day, Luke decided to act. He approached Alice, believing that her jealousy could serve as a useful tool in his own game. Luke told her that he had seen Kelly and Eric together, hinting at a romantic connection. Alice, already on the brink of an emotional explosion, took this information as confirmation of her suspicions. Her behavior became even more obsessive, and her anger only intensified. This created an environment where all the key players in the conflict were teetering on the edge of emotional breakdowns. Alice felt she was losing control of her life and her relationship with Eric. Luke continued to harbor jealousy toward Eric and resentment over Kelly's indifference. Meanwhile, Kelly tried to avoid conflict, but couldn't ignore the growing tension around her. Gradually, the atmosphere at Silver Lake Stars School became increasingly toxic. The strained relationships among Kelly, Alice, Eric, and Luke set the stage for events that would forever change their lives. November 16, 2012 began as an ordinary autumn day at Silver Lake Stars School. Yet for a few students, this date would become a turning point. The tension that had been building for weeks reached its peak as events unfolded in a way no one could have anticipated. That evening would change the lives of everyone involved and leave an indelible mark on the school's history. Kelly Reed, as usual, stayed late at the stadium after cheerleading practice. Evening practices were a regular occurrence for her, especially with only a few days left before the big tournament. Her team worked hard, but Kelly often stayed behind to perfect her routines alone. On this occasion, she was also waiting for Eric Lynch, who had promised to meet her after practice to discuss something important. However, as the minutes passed in silence, Kelly began to feel an inexplicable unease. Meanwhile, Alice Walker, who had been in a state of extreme emotional tension for several days, decided to act. Earlier that day, she had overheard more rumors about Kelly and Eric. For Alice, this was the final straw. In her mind, Kelly had become the enemy who had destroyed her relationship and reputation. That evening, Alice resolved to put an end to the situation. She headed to the stadium, certain she would find Kelly there. At the same time, Luke Campbell also made his decision. His jealousy and anger, which had been simmering for so long, became unbearable. Luke learned from a mutual friend that Kelly and Eric were supposed to meet at the stadium after practice. For Luke, this was his chance to intervene and express everything he had been holding inside. Fueled by determination and raw emotion, he made his way to the stadium. Kelly, alone on the field, didn't immediately notice she was being watched. The stadium, dimly lit by scattered floodlights, seemed deserted. She was unaware that Alice and Luke were already there, each with their own motives and plans for the evening. Alice arrived first. She saw Kelly focused on practicing her routine for the upcoming performance. To Alice, this seemed like the perfect moment to confront her. In Alice's mind, it wouldn't be just a conversation. It would be a reckoning. She was determined that this time Kelly would hear everything she had been bottling up for weeks. When Luke arrived at the stadium, he spotted Alice standing off to the side, silently watching Kelly. He approached her, trying to understand her intentions. At first, Alice wanted to be left alone, but their interests turned out to align too closely. Alice quickly convinced Luke that Kelly was the source of all their problems. Her words amplified Luke's already volatile emotions, pushing him closer to the edge. Together, Alice and Luke decided to approach Kelly. At that moment, their intentions weren't entirely clear, even to themselves. Alice wanted to vent her anger and make Kelly feel guilty. Luke, on the other hand, was consumed by a mix of emotions. He wanted to explain how Kelly had ruined his life, but he was also seething with jealousy, resentment, and an undefined rage. When they approached Kelly, she turned around, startled. Their presence on the empty stadium field was unexpected and confusing. Alice and Luke exchanged glances, but neither wanted to back down. Their emotions overwhelmed them, and the situation spiraled out of control. That evening was supposed to be a peaceful one for all three of them. None of them could have foreseen that this encounter would prove fatal, bringing irrevocable consequences to their lives. The night of November 16, 2012, left an indelible mark on the history of Silver Lake Stars School. On the empty stadium, under the dim glow of the floodlights, an encounter unfolded that became the culmination of the tensions between Kelly Reed, Alice Walker, and Luke Campbell. Their hidden emotions, unresolved conflicts, and suppressed grievances converged in a moment where reason and self-control gave way to unchecked impulses. Kelly Reed, who had stayed behind at the stadium after practice, didn't expect to see anyone that late. When she noticed Alice and Luke approaching, confusion flashed across her face. She couldn't understand why they were there or what they wanted. Her cautious yet confident question, "What are you doing here?" went unanswered. Instead, Alice took a step forward, and an invisible tension immediately filled the air between the two girls. Alice began unleashing her grievances against Kelly. Her voice was sharp, her words filled with anger. She accused Kelly of ruining her relationship with Eric. Kelly tried to calm her down, explaining that there was nothing romantic between her and Eric, but her words only fueled Alice's rage. For Alice, the situation had long ceased to be about logic. It was about control, jealousy, and the need to defend her status at school. Luke stood slightly behind, watching the argument unfold. His emotions were complex and conflicting. He felt sympathy for Kelly, but couldn't ignore the jealousy, anger, and sense of injustice that had been building inside him. When Alice turned to him, calling Kelly a manipulator, Luke unexpectedly took her side. His voice, filled with bitterness, joined the accusations against Kelly. Kelly, who had been trying to remain calm, suddenly realized that the situation was spiraling out of control. It seemed to her that Alice and Luke had conspired against her, and this thought frightened her. She attempted to end the conversation and leave, but Luke suddenly blocked her path. His voice grew louder, his words more aggressive. Then, in a sudden and uncontrollable moment, Luke shoved Kelly. That single action changed everything. Kelly lost her balance and fell, hitting her head on a nearby metal pipe. The seconds it took to comprehend what had happened felt like an eternity. Kelly lay motionless, and the oppressive silence that followed was deafening. Alice stood frozen, unable to believe what had just occurred. Her hands trembled, her breathing uneven. She looked at Luke, waiting for him to do or say something, but Luke remained silent. His face was tense, his mind racing with thoughts, but none of them offered a way to fix the situation. Eventually, Luke decided to act. He told Alice they had to cover up what had happened. His voice carried a mix of panic and determination. He wrapped Kelly in her cheerleading jacket and carried her to one of the stadium's maintenance rooms. While Alice stood paralyzed with fear, Luke grabbed a spray can he found nearby and scrawled large red letters on the wall, "Love destroys." His intention was clear. Dime, to divert suspicion towards someone else. Luke believed the message would create the impression that the crime was committed over a romantic conflict involving Eric. Afterward, he forced Alice to promise to stay silent. He assured her that no one would ever learn the truth if they stuck together. Later that night, Luke and Alice left the stadium separately, each burdened with the weight of what had happened. Luke appeared calm, but internally he was torn apart by conflicting emotions. Alice, on the other hand, was dazed, her expression vacant, consumed by fear. That night marked the beginning of events that could not be undone. What seemed like an innocent confrontation had escalated into a tragedy that forever altered the lives of everyone involved. The morning of November 17, 2012 at Silver Lake Stars School started like any other, until a horrifying discovery shattered the routine. Around 7:15 a.m., school custodian Robert Grayson, performing his usual rounds, noticed something unusual. The maintenance room beneath the stadium bleachers was open, even though it was always locked. When he stepped inside, his eyes fell on Kelly Reed. Beside the wall, in large red letters, the words "Love destroys" were scrawled ominously. Grayson immediately called the police, and within 20 minutes, the scene was cordoned off with yellow tape. Detectives Sarah Gray and Adam Richards from the Silver Lake Police Department arrived shortly after. Sarah, a seasoned detective with years of experience, instantly sensed the gravity of the case and its potential societal impact. Her partner Adam, younger by a few years, specialized in evidence analysis, and had a keen eye for details others often missed. Their first task was to examine the crime scene. The lack of visible signs of a struggle in that meeting raised suspicions. The graffiti on the wall, painted in red, seemed too deliberate, almost as if the perpetrator wanted to send a message or mislead investigators. The police gathered key evidence. Fingerprints were found on a nearby pipe, on Kelly's jacket, and on the door handle of the maintenance room. Surveillance cameras installed near the stadium entrance also became a primary focus. Sarah noted that the perpetrator had acted impulsively, as evidenced by the open room and traces left on the victim's clothing. After collecting preliminary evidence, the detectives began interviewing school staff and students. Robert Grayson's testimony confirmed that the stadium was empty after practice on November 16th. However, he recalled noticing the lights beneath the bleachers staying on longer than usual. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it, but now the detail became a significant part of the investigation. Conversations with other students quickly led the detectives to several key names. Kelly had been popular, but her recent friendship with Eric Lynch, the school's star football player, had drawn attention. Rumors of their relationship spread, especially since Eric was dating Alice Walker, the cheerleading captain. Students also mentioned Luke Campbell, one of Eric's friends, who had been acting withdrawn lately and was often seen observing Kelly from a distance. Sarah and Adam decided to begin their interviews with Kelly's inner circle. Their first subject was Alice Walker. During her interview, Alice appeared nervous. She denied having any serious conflicts with Kelly, but her behavior told a different story. Sarah noted Alice's trembling hands and frequent pauses. Alice admitted to having some misunderstandings with Kelly, but insisted she had been home the night of the tragedy. Next was Eric Lynch, who seemed more distraught by Kelly's death than defensive. He confirmed that he had planned to meet Kelly after practice, but had been delayed by a family dinner. Eric expressed genuine concern for Kelly and emphasized that their relationship had been purely platonic. Finally, the detectives interviewed Luke Campbell. His responses raised the most questions. Luke seemed eager to cooperate, but his excessive willingness to help appeared suspicious. He repeatedly claimed to know nothing about what had happened that night, but Sarah noticed he avoided direct eye contact. Sarah Gray sensed this case would not be straightforward. She knew each of these students was hiding something. The collected evidence and testimonies painted a complex picture with three central figures: Alice, Eric, and Luke. The investigation was just beginning, and Sarah understood the truth lay in the details they had yet to uncover. The investigation into Kelly Reed's death was gaining momentum. The Silver Lake Police Department had collected crucial evidence that began to form a clearer picture, though it was far from complete. Detectives Sarah Gray and Adam Richards tirelessly analyzed statements, surveillance footage, and forensic reports. Public pressure was mounting daily as the community demanded answers and Kelly's family sought justice. The first major breakthrough came from the surveillance cameras. Footage from the stadium showed two individuals leaving the maintenance room around 10:30 p.m. on November 16th. Though the video quality was poor, it clearly captured that one of the figures was female. Sarah and Adam theorized this could be Alice Walker. Her nervous demeanor during questioning, coupled with inconsistent statements, made her a prime suspect. Further evidence emerged during the forensic analysis of Kelly's cheerleading jacket. The examination revealed fingerprints belonging to Luke Campbell. This was a significant finding, confirming his presence at the scene. Additionally, partial prints matching Luke's were found on the metal pipe near where Kelly had fallen. These findings raised more questions. What exactly transpired between Luke, Alice, and Kelly that night? And how far were they willing to go to conceal the truth? Sarah decided to re-interview Alice, as the new evidence reframed her previous testimony. During the second interrogation, Alice appeared even more tense. The detectives confronted her with the surveillance footage and evidence tying her to the stadium that night. At first, Alice denied everything, but her composure began to crumble. Her hands trembled and her voice wavered. After several minutes of silence, she admitted to being at the stadium with Luke, but claimed she had no direct involvement in Kelly's death. Alice described her version of events from that night. She explained that she had gone to the stadium to confront Kelly about her relationship with Eric. She insisted she hadn't planned for things to escalate, but the argument quickly spiraled out of control. According to Alice, Luke intervened during their heated exchange, and his emotions turned into aggression. She claimed it was Luke who pushed Kelly, leading to the fatal accident. While Alice's confession provided valuable insight, Sarah remained cautious. Alice could have distorted the truth to protect herself. Nevertheless, her testimony shifted the focus of the investigation toward Luke as the primary suspect. With the new information, the detectives decided to question Luke again. This time, his demeanor was different. He appeared calm, too calm, almost rehearsed. Luke denied any involvement, insisting that Alice was trying to frame him. However, when Sarah and Adam presented him with the surveillance footage and evidence of his fingerprints on the jacket and pipe, his confidence wavered. His voice trembled, and he hesitated before finally admitting, "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Luke claimed the incident was an accident. He explained that he had pushed Kelly during the argument, but he hadn't meant to harm her. He said he panicked afterward and tried to cover up what had happened. This admission became a turning point in the investigation. Now the detectives needed to determine whether Alice and Luke acted together or if Luke had acted alone in a moment of impulsive rage. To strengthen their case, Sarah and Adam decided to review phone records and messages exchanged between Alice and Luke. They hoped to find evidence of premeditation or collusion. Meanwhile, they worked meticulously to build an airtight case against Luke while keeping Alice under scrutiny as a potential accomplice. Piece by piece, the truth of what happened that night began to emerge. Yet the full extent of the tragedy had yet to be revealed. The investigation was heading toward a resolution, but the emotional weight of the case loomed large over everyone involved. The trial of Luke Campbell and Alice Walker began in the summer of 2013. The case captivated the town of Silver Lake, dominating local news and conversations. A community once proud of its Silver Lake Stars school now found itself grappling with the aftermath of a tragedy that had shaken it to its core. The prosecution's case against Luke was built on an overwhelming body of evidence gathered by detectives Sarah Gray and Adam Richards. Luke's fingerprints on the pipe, Kelly's cheerleading jacket, and the door handle of the maintenance room were key components of the case. Surveillance footage showing Luke and Alice leaving the stadium on the night of November 16th was equally damning. Most critical, however, was Luke's confession during questioning, in which he admitted to pushing Kelly but insisted it had been an accident. Alice Walker was charged with being an accessory and obstructing justice. Her confession during the second interrogation, though valuable, raised questions about her level of involvement. On one hand, she implicated Luke as the main perpetrator. On the other, her decision to remain silent about the incident and her actions to help cover up the crime placed her squarely in the prosecutor's crosshairs. During the trial, Luke attempted to justify his actions. His defense argued that the incident was an unfortunate accident, emphasizing his emotional state and lack of intent to harm Kelly. However, the prosecution countered with evidence of Luke's aggressive behavior, pointing out that his deliberate actions to conceal the crime indicated a clear awareness of guilt. Alice, by contrast, did not deny her presence at the stadium. She recounted the events of that night, claiming she had gone to confront Kelly about Eric, but that things spiraled out of control. She portrayed herself as a frightened girl caught in a situation she couldn't control, stating she had tried to stop Luke but failed. Her defense highlighted her eventual cooperation with authorities and her remorse. Testimonies from classmates, including Eric Lynch, painted a vivid picture of the dynamics among Kelly, Alice, Luke, and Eric. Eric confirmed that his relationship with Kelly had been purely platonic and expressed deep sorrow over her death. His testimony also highlighted the tension between Kelly and Alice, further establishing the motive. After 3 weeks of intense proceedings, the jury delivered its verdict. Luke Campbell was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Luke's claims that he had acted out of emotion and panic were dismissed in light of the evidence, which suggested calculated attempts to cover up his actions. Alice Walker received a significantly lighter sentence. She was found guilty of being an accessory and obstructing justice. Her genuine remorse, cooperation with investigators, and the absence of evidence linking her to physical harm against Kelly led the court to sentence her to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5 years for good behavior. The courtroom was filled with mixed emotions when the sentences were read. For Kelly's family, the verdicts brought some sense of justice, though their loss was irreparable. Her parents, who had attended every day of the trial, wept quietly as the sentences were announced. No punishment, they said, could ever bring their daughter back. The trial also left an indelible mark on the other individuals involved. Eric Lynch, who had been a central figure in the narrative, decided to leave Silver Lake. The constant media attention, lingering rumors, and memories of the tragedy made it impossible for him to stay. He abandoned his dreams of a football career and relocated to another state, hoping to start fresh. For the town of Silver Lake, the trial marked the end of one chapter, but left behind a lasting shadow. The once proud Silver Lake Stars School saw its reputation decline sharply, with enrollment numbers dropping in the years that followed. The stadium where Kelly's life had ended became a haunting reminder of what had occurred, and its maintenance room was permanently sealed. While the legal proceedings provided closure for some, the emotional scars remained fresh. Silver Lake was no longer the peaceful, idyllic community it had once seemed, and the events of that fateful night would continue to serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked emotions and unresolved conflicts. Years had passed since the tragedy that shook Silver Lake and forever changed the lives of those involved. Yet the scars left by that night had not healed. The events of November 16, 2012 left an indelible mark on the community and the people closest to the incident, who struggled to move forward. The Silver Lake Stars Stadium, once a symbol of the town's pride and athletic success, had become a place to avoid. The maintenance room beneath the bleachers, where Kelly Reid's body was discovered, was sealed off permanently. Rumors and whispers about what happened that night eventually subsided, but the story remained etched in the memory of every Silver Lake resident. For Kelly's parents, the tragedy became a source of unending grief. Losing their only daughter left a void that could never be filled. Her mother, Miriam Reid, channeled her pain into action by founding an organization dedicated to supporting teenagers struggling with bullying, jealousy, and toxic relationships. The foundation held educational programs in local schools and provided access to counseling for young people. Miriam often spoke at events, sharing her daughter's story as a cautionary tale to others. Alice Walker, who received an 8-year sentence, served 5 years in prison before being released early for good behavior. Life after incarceration proved to be an uphill battle. Silver Lake held no place for her anymore. While some in the community acknowledged her lesser role in the tragedy, many still viewed her as complicit. Alice moved to another town, attempting to rebuild her life and leave her past behind. She avoided discussing the events of that night and severed all ties with Luke and anyone connected to the tragedy. Luke Campbell remained in prison, serving a life sentence without parole. Incarceration transformed him into a withdrawn and isolated figure. He received no visits from friends or family, and the letters he wrote to Kelly's parents went unanswered. Over time, Luke stopped reaching out entirely, retreating into himself. His name became a cautionary example of how jealousy, obsession, and unchecked emotions could destroy lives. Eric Lynch, who had been an important witness in the case, left Silver Lake after graduating high school. The tragedy shattered his dreams of a football career, as media attention and constant scrutiny followed him everywhere. He moved to another state, enrolled in college, and tried to rebuild his life. Yet those who knew Eric said he never fully escaped the shadow of that night. Silver Lake Stars School struggled to recover from the blow to its reputation. Once known for nurturing future champions, the school experienced a sharp decline in enrollment following the tragedy. Efforts to restore trust included implementing safety measures, anti-bullying programs, and mental health initiatives, but the stigma persisted. The stadium, now rarely used, stood as a somber reminder of the events that had tarnished the school's name. For Detectives Sarah Gray and Adam Richards, the case left a lasting impression. Sarah, a veteran in her department, saw the tragedy as another stark reminder of the importance of addressing youth issues. After the case concluded, she retired from law enforcement and dedicated herself to community outreach, focusing on preventing teenage violence and promoting conflict resolution. Adam, meanwhile, continued his work as a detective, but often reflected on the complexities of the Silver Lake case, which he described as one of the most emotionally charged investigations of his career. The town of Silver Lake, once a peaceful and proud community, was forever changed. Its residents often spoke of Kelly Reid as a symbol of unrealized potential, a reminder of how hidden conflicts and toxic relationships could spiral out of control. The stadium remained largely abandoned, and no event held in the town ever recaptured the same excitement that had once defined the Silver Lake Stars games. For those left behind, the tragedy became a painful lesson about the importance of communication, empathy, and addressing conflicts before they escalate. The events of that night served as a stark warning of how dangerous suppressed emotions and unresolved tensions could be, not just for individuals, but for an entire community.